This is SEC Mafia. Welcome in, everyone. Holiday season, Christmas Eve edition of SEC Mafia. We hope everybody has had a good holiday season so far, and we wish every one of our listeners a very, very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year as well. Only a couple games to cover this week on the recap, and then looking ahead to I think a quadruplet of bowl games for the SEC upcoming on Friday. Randy from Mobile, we're gonna dive right in, get started with it.
Yeah, I hope
This,
everybody enjoyed the playoff first round games as much as we all did. And judging from the ratings, I don't think very many people did. From the early ratings pool that I saw, there was not a game that did over 6.5 million views. Just to put that into perspective, Alabama, Georgia early in the season did between 14 and 15 million. Georgia, Texas, and Atlanta did between 15 and 16 million. So we have four playoff games that did not even get half of what some of your bigger marquee games in the SEC got this year.
pretty sure I fell asleep during one of the games. I think it was Clemson and Texas. No. It was the non-conference. It was the non-SEC games that I sort of yawned and fell asleep because we got to watch the best teams go at it this week. Just the best.
I thought it was, and we don't have to rant on it because we've done this for 3 or 4 podcasts in a row now, but obviously I don't agree with the teams that got in. I don't agree with the seedings. Just was not a good opening weekend. Did not look good for the committee. Definitely looks like they've got some egg in their face, but we'll get into all that. But yeah, here you see our contact information. Twitter X, the handle is at SEC Godfather, email secgodfather@mail.com, Facebook handle Randy Thomas, and we have created a Facebook group, SEC Mafia. Invite people to that, please. It is a public page. You are free to invite whomever to get them on there. That is where we'll be doing a lot of interaction going forward. That and Twitter. So
Yes.
definitely help promote it.
Absolutely, and on YouTube, as always, like, subscribe. We had a little bump in subscribers this week. We love to see it. So make sure you're subscribed. That way you can get a notification on your phone or laptop or wherever you listen. That way, when we release a new episode, you can go right to it. Get right into it. We can interact with you. Please comment below on the YouTube pages. I love going through and looking at old comments, seeing new comments. And we just appreciate everybody that just tunes in and watches us. We're gonna keep doing this thing, and we have a website that is in the designing stages right now. It should be released sometime this next week. It'll have all of our previous episodes. It'll have maybe some merchandise, if you guys want to purchase a hat. You see the hat right here, maybe a mug or something. So guys, we thank you. We love every single one of our listeners. Score shout outs for the week. Sorry. Mr. Dave Sexton. He was the only one of our listeners to pick Ohio State to win 24-14 this week. Congratulations. And Mr. Dante Williams, the closest predicted score of the Clemson versus Texas game at 34-21 Texas. Good job, Dante. You're doing great, man. Still can't beat tomorrow in fantasy, though. So with that, we are going to dive right into the SEC college football matchups. We're going to do a little round recap of the first round, starting with Texas versus Clemson, 38-24. Texas routing them offensively in this one. Randy, your thoughts on just kind of the opening up of Texas's offense in this one, and really sort of I'm not going to say their outcoming of a game or something, but they definitely played their best offensive ball when they needed to.
Yeah, going back a few weeks ago when we started this podcast, I can remember we had a conversation about Texas and Quintravious Wisner taking over the backfield carries. They've since gotten Blue back. He's gotten a little bit healthier again. But when they can get their running game going, they are hard to beat. To me, that was the key 292 yards rushing from Texas, 76 yards rushing from Clemson. Clemson only averaged 3.2 yards per carry. Texas was just completely gashing them. It was very, very evident early on in this football game that Texas was going to be able to control both lines of scrimmage. Give Cade Klubnik his due. This was probably, in my opinion, I think this was the best game that he's had passing. He did 136 yards. Was a little bit disappointed in the Texas secondary, but Clemson would not just lay down. Texas had several opportunities in this football game to really put their foot on their throats and bury them, and Clemson just kept coming back. But, in the end, it was just too much Texas, too much of the ground game, and they were able to get that 2-score win.
Yeah. Trey Wisner, 15 carries, 110 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And then Mr. Jadon Blue, 14 carries, 146 yards, 2 touchdowns. When you have 2 backs that are that productive, it's an endless train. You'll have them swapping in and out. They will never get tired. They will never falter. And I'm glad that you said that about the controlling the line of scrimmage. It opens up everything on both sides of the ball to be able to control the trenches. And I said this a couple of weeks ago. When you control the trenches, you control the outcome of the game. When you are physical up front, you can run the ball. You can protect and pass the ball. When you're physical up front on defense, that opens up to get pressure with 4 guys and drop 7 back in coverage. Or you can, bring 1 and blitz 5. But when you control the trenches, you are going to have a great opportunity to control the outcome of this game. And that's exactly what Texas did. Not to mention the offense. It was high powered. It was elite. They were 4 for 5 in the red zone, and Clemson as well. Clemson's offense did pretty well. They were 2 for 3. They just could never get over the hump, but they controlled the trenches, and the outcome was what they wanted.
Yeah, to me, both of these coaches at times really seem to be just grasping for air. Sark had an opportunity when the score was 21-7 to kick a field goal and go up by 17 points.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I'm not a coach or anything like that, but if I were, I think my philosophy would be, if a field goal was going to give me a lead or give me a multi-possession lead, then I'm taking those points. And what I mean by that, obviously, if the game's tied, I'm kicking a field goal to get the lead. If I'm up by 3, then more than likely, if it's 4th 1 and 2 and the analytics say go, I'm probably going to go for it at that time because I'm wanting to score a touchdown and stretch that to a 2-possession lead. If I'm up by 14 and a field goal is going to give me a 17-point, which is a 3-possession lead, I'm going to take those points and continue to put possessions in between me and the opponent. And yes. I don't know, maybe I'm just kind of an old head or whatnot, but it just blows my mind how many coaches just seem to give up 3 points and act like it's the plague. Now, let me also say this. The last few weeks, Auburn, the field goal kicker from Texas, he has been a little bit sporadic. And so maybe Sark didn't want to give any kind of momentum with a missed field goal. But when you go for it on 4th down and you don't get it, you give, in my opinion, more momentum than if you were to kick a field goal and miss it.
Well, it's just like we talked about a couple of weeks ago with Texas A&M versus Texas. Just if you drive the length of the field on the opening drive and then you get down to your 15-yard line and go for it and get stopped, you have then created momentum for the offense to come out there and just shift the atmosphere. Whereas if you kick the field goal and you're up per se 1 possession, 3-0, it's sort of a different ball game because then you actually get the opportunity to kick it off and pin them deep, forcing them to drive the length of the field. So I'm with you. I'm with you on that. Possessions are key in every marquee matchup, in every football game. Possessions, and especially the time of possession. And I think relative to what we were talking about earlier, the way that Texas was controlling the clock, the way that they were basically dominating their opponent, they were able to hold time of possession in this game. But it's just like the little things like that. Sark not sending out his field goal unit and that giving a spark to Clemson. I mean, what if he would have kicked? Would Clemson, have drove down on that next drive and scored? I mean, it's just small things like that you can think about.
Yeah, absolutely. And to further, drive that point home, when you start looking at fourth down percentages, Clemson was 1 of 3 on fourth down.
Mm-hmm.
Texas was 1 of 4. So, that's another thing to think of is Clemson missed 2 fourth down conversions. Texas missed 3. That is just instant momentum that you are giving away in those scenarios. But, like I said earlier, I was kind of shocked at how well Clemson was able to move the ball in the air. I was very impressed with some of the throws that Klubnik made, because it's not like he just had guys wide open. He was laying the ball in the breadbasket. He was throwing guys open. Their receivers were making plays. I thought this was one of the better games that Clemson receivers had this season. And it kind of goes back to Texas's secondary. That is kind of the weak spot of their defense. Their front seven we know is elite, but they can be had in that back end.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Great game. Congratulations to Texas. Moving on to the final 8,
Moving on to play the Sun Devils, a 13.5-point favorite. So I'm afraid we're going to get into the final 8 and have several more games like the first weekend, but we'll break that down next week so we can move on to the balls. What did Tennessee do to us this weekend? Man,
they hurt the SEC. I will say, they hurt us. It was not
the one good thing about the first 3 games that we got to watch: the Notre Dame Indiana game Friday night, SMU Penn State, and then Texas and Clemson. Up until this game right here kicked off Saturday night, our chests were poked out. We were vindicated. We were right. We had the world admitting all these teams that we let in should not have been let in. South Carolina, Ole Miss, and Alabama should have gotten in. What have we done? This is a train wreck. This is bad. And then Tennessee goes and gets blown out. And then everybody kind of spins their narrative again and was just like, well, nobody's any good.
And it's hard to say, because if you look at all the teams that have been the topic of conversations for so long the last couple of weeks, if you look at Tennessee, Ohio State, if you look at Alabama, South Carolina, Ole Miss, and SMU, none of those teams were undefeated. Every single one of those teams had their warts, and it seems that Tennessee's warts came out at the worst possible time. But of the other 2 that I mentioned, between Indiana, SMU, Penn State, versus the 3 SEC teams that got left out, we see that, yes, they have warts, but those teams are also proven winners in big-time matchups. But like you said, that's a different topic of conversation when we look next week to look ahead at the quarterfinals of the playoff. We'll discuss more of that, because the committee ought to be ashamed. But this matchup at Ohio State, it was actually the first game at Ohio Stadium in a December. So both teams playing in this type of weather for the first time in December, which kind of throws the weather argument out there. But I do think it affected Tennessee just because of the way they acted. The clowns running out there shirtless and just shorts. I mean, because like we were talking earlier, when you get cold, you're cold. You're done.
I'm not a big rah-rah guy. I don't like the talking beforehand. I don't like all that crap. Just after watching Game Day Friday, I was really hoping that Indiana and Kurt Cignetti would have gotten beat by 100. I just can't stand that stuff. And when Tennessee came out in shorts with no shirts, like, we're here to prove a point. We're here to prove that the code doesn't bother us. I guess they thought that's all they needed to go do was prove that they could, go shirtless in the cold weather. I guess they forgot, to realize that there was a playoff football game that they needed to show up for. But I'm with you. When you get cold and your body is in that frigid temperature like that, and you're cold, it is so hard to get warmed up. And man, I don't know if it was just me, they looked so slow, especially on defense. Ohio State several times would just run a little crossing mesh concept, hit a receiver in stride, and the safety would take an angle and just get left in the dust. I mean,
Yeah.
just and I know they've got the SEC speed, so I don't know. I don't know if the moment was just too big for them. I don't know if the code affected them. I don't know what it was. That is not the Tennessee defense we've watched all season.
No, and looking into it pains me because they were doing the little fundamental things wrong, taking a bad angle here, not playing their zone correctly, getting caught up watching the quarterback. And like you said, it's not the same Tennessee team that we saw. And a lot of times when teams like Tennessee, who have finally gotten their shot and have made the playoff for the first time, I think you get so wrapped up in the emotion that you forget your level of training sometimes, and you're so emotionally high that you tire out on emotions before the game, and then you're exhausted. And I kind of think that's what was happening. Was they were so excited, they were so ready for the moment, their emotions caught up with them, and then before the game they utilized all their emotions, and then they played too emotional in the game. And when you start playing too emotional and you let your emotions affect how you play, that's when you get caught up, just like they did in a blowout loss.
And you go back to Josh Heupel. Josh Heupel he comes across as a mild mannered guy.
Mm-hmm.
I've watched them play a lot. Even when he got off the bus, walking in the stadium, he's pumping, he's going crazy, he's coming by slapping hands, and he's playing up to the crowd and all this, and it's just like you say, it's just like they got off the bus so amped up and jacked up. Kind of makes you wonder, did they get too jacked up for this game? But check this stat out. This is a telltale sign of the night that they had. Tennessee's defensive line has been heralded as one of the best in the country all season long.
Yep.
Will Howard,
Mm-hmm.
who had only thrown for 300 yards in one game in his career, throws for 317.
Mm-hmm.
Tennessee, the vaunted defensive line, is playing against an offensive line from Ohio State that is missing their starting center, who won the Remington, missing another offensive lineman. And not only did Tennessee not register one sack, 0 quarterback hits. Will Howard was not touched in the pocket by a Tennessee defensive player. That's the game. When your secondary can be had, because that's where Tennessee's been got. That's how Georgia was able to exploit them. Carson Beck, he showed up for one of his big games against Tennessee a few weeks ago and kind of laid the blueprint out there. And when you can block and you can protect and give the quarterback time, there are plays to be made against their defense. And Chip Kelly just absolutely dialed up the perfect game plan.
Well, not only that, but on Ohio State's defensive side and Tennessee's offensive side, I had never seen Ohio State defense play like this year. The only morsel of defense that I've seen them play, if they were playing a team with a pulse, would be the Oregon game, to where it just came down to the fluke last play, and that was the last time we really saw Ohio State's defense play fairly well. And even then, Oregon's running back ran all over them, and the whole ordeal with Dylan Sampson was just odd in itself. But when your offense is only creating 3.7 yards per play, that is not the recipe for a successful night. And when you go 215 yards below your average of yardage each game, that is not a recipe for success. They did not control the line of scrimmage at all for the entirety of the night. They allowed Ohio State to sack Nico 5 times in this game. So it's just like what we were talking about earlier. When you control the trenches and you can control the line of scrimmage and you can gain ground up front, it opens up every single part of your playbook. And we see how Nico does under pressure. I mean, Nico under pressure is very, very, very unsuccessful.
Absolutely. He is very average, very pedestrian. I did think for a moment, coming out to start the second half, 21-10, I thought if there was a way Tennessee could score and cut it to 21-17, then they would get that momentum swing. Ohio State maybe would start to doubt themselves. Because let's be honest, you had the ball takeover. I mean, you probably had 25% of the stadium, maybe 30% of the stadium were Tennessee Vol fans. That is crazy to think of for a first round playoff game, to where so many people sold their tickets and so many Tennessee fans bought them on the secondary market. And I mean, you could have really gotten some momentum at that point in time, but just credit Ohio State. They closed the door on that and just kept pouring it on. They stayed aggressive and allowed Will Howard to continue making plays down the field. This was the offense that we thought we were going to get with Chip Kelly. Receivers making plays. They've got one of the best receiving core in America, and they put on a show Saturday night. And Tennessee had no answer for it whatsoever.
They sure did. Not to mention when you have, and of course they're not big numbers or anything like that, but when you have a 2-back system with Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson, those guys will not tire out splitting those kinds of reps, and they were productive. They each had 2 touchdowns of their own. So kudos to Ohio State. Congratulations to Ryan Day. He probably just saved his job, honestly. They were ready to fire him if he lost this game. If the scores would have been reversed, if it was Tennessee 42, Ohio State 17, you would have seen him gone immediately after the game.
I think so, and that is crazy, and that is crazy knee jerk.
It is, because his record's like 60-something and 10. I mean, he's been successful his entire time there. They've had 5-10 win seasons since he's been there. I mean,
he in 2020 he made a national championship game. Really and truly, in 2022, probably should have won a national title. The one thing I didn't agree, and I know we're going back in that time machine, but in 22, when they got into field goal range with about 30, 40 seconds left, he got very, very conservative, and he put it on the foot of a college kicker from about 45 yards instead of him trying to use the clock and pick up another 10 to 15 yards to make it a more manageable kick, and that ultimately cost him a national title. And of course, we know about the four game losing streak to Michigan and all that. But you mentioned Dylan Sampson a few seconds ago. I've not seen an official statement on him. I know they interviewed Heupel at halftime and kind of asked him about it, and he just kind of gave coach speak and, said there's a lot of football left to be played and, really wouldn't give an answer. So I don't know if Sampson was banged up before the game, maybe at practice, or if it happened early on in the game. But there's no way Tennessee's winning a game in the Horseshoe with Dylan Sampson getting 3 touches. He's not. You're just not going to do that. He's the reigning SEC Player of the Year, and he gets 3 touches. So something was definitely going on.
And with him, you could tell with how low their third down percentage was and how low their percentages was on rushing yards that he was not in the game, because they were below their average on third down percentage. They were like 25% on third downs on the night, and their average is usually 52 or 53, I think. So kudos to Ohio State. Congratulations. They get to go play Oregon in a rematch at the Fiesta Bowl.
Once again, I'm so just disgusted with the seeding. I mean, Oregon. Yes, I know they lost to Michigan. I know they lost to Michigan, and that's the last time we saw them. And you shouldn't look at it this way, but we've always done this in college sports. They've got a top 5 roster. They've got a $25 million roster. They've got the talent. Talent's not the problem. Talent's not the issue. They've got some very good wins by beating Penn State, beat Indiana. Both of those teams are in the playoffs. The fact that they were the 8th seed.
Wild.
That's insane to me.
The whole and comment below on YouTube or send this in on your email. What does the committee need to do to fix this? What has to be changed in order to ensure that the 12 best teams, not the 12 most deserving, not the 12 that won the most games, because we all know and we all see that schedules are not the same. What does the committee need to do to ensure that the 12
so let's go ahead and stay on that. The reader question we had sent in from Nick Myers was, what changes do we think will come when this current contract runs out? What changes need to be made? Let's go ahead and answer that while you brought that up. And I'm going to throw this out there. The first thing that we have got to do is we've got to set some guidelines. We have got to set some criteria. We've got to put some weighted metric out there and say, okay, this matters. And if it's going to be wins, if wins are all that matters, then that needs to be established so that everybody can go out and try to schedule the weakest schedule that they can have just to run their number of wins up. And if wins is the only thing that matters, then by golly, Army should have gotten in because they only had one loss at the time. Yes, I know they lost to Navy last weekend, but that was before, or actually after the final playoff rankings came out and they were 10-1. Boise should be the number 2 seed. And so that's my whole problem with this.
Here,
there's no metric that everybody has to follow.
And here's what it boils down to. And I hope and I pray that it gets changed for next year. If wins are going to hold the weight, we must do it the way that college basketball does it, with quad 1 wins, quad 2 wins, quad 3 wins, and quad 4 wins. That is the only way that you will get an even playing field to measure out the wins that matter. Automatic conference championship bids, that's got to be thrown out. That has got to be gone. You should go back to a seating format to where it is computerized. It is not based upon 13 men and women in a room that hardly watch these games, that have never played a down of meaningful football in their life, are getting to decide this thing. It needs to be back to a computerized version that can show you, not just rely on a anonymous source, analytics source, to where they're getting all these stats from that is not even publicized. There just needs to be more transparency. And that's all anybody wants, is just transparency.
Well, and the thing about it is you keep hearing that, well, we just can't go by the eye test. You can't judge by the eye test.
That is what this whole playoff is based off this year, was eye test.
Well, my eyes told me all season long the ACC should be a 1-bid league. And everything that I saw on Saturday proved that. Now, you can say, well, Tennessee got run out of the stadium, so I guess the SEC is not as good as what everybody thought. You still had Texas win a playoff game, and you still had Tennessee. Yes, they got beat down, but that may be the best team in the country. When it's all said and done, Ohio State may win the national title. And there's a big difference in losing 42-17 to a team with Ohio State's roster and Clemson and SMU just getting boat raced like everybody knew was coming.
And that's the thing that people are wanting to talk about. Oh, well, the SEC this, just because they lost to Tennessee. We were arguing for the SEC to get more teams in, but we were not arguing against Ohio State. Ohio State deserved to be there. Oregon deserved to be there. Penn State, maybe, may or not. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. SMU, Clemson, Indiana are fraud. And we got to watch fraudulent football for free on Saturday. You're welcome, America.
Here's my thing on that. The Big Ten basically got 2 benefits of the doubt with Indiana and Penn State. They got 2. Every team that the SEC got in was 10-2 or better and had very impressive wins. You made a comment earlier about quad 1 and 2, like we have in basketball. Whenever you lose a quad 1 game in basketball, it really has no effect on you because you are rewarded for going out and scheduling that game. We don't have that here. And it's funny that nobody ever brings up college basketball whenever they talk about the wins being the only thing that matters. I actually looked this up earlier. In the past 20 years, there have been 4 times that a team has won 22 or more games and been ranked in the final AP top 25, and they did not make the NCAA tournament.
Yep.
But it's like you said, it all comes down to eye test. College football, there's 134 teams. There are so many teams out there, and the schedules are so different. Everybody wants to compare college football to the NFL, and everybody wants to say, well, in the NFL, it's all about the wins. You win your division, the wild cards come down to who's got the most wins. Yeah, but everybody's playing a similar schedule. It's set up to where if you're in the AFC East, your division is going to cross over with the West, and everybody in your division is basically going to have the exact same schedule. It's not like that.
And what? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
And what people fail to realize, and what happens in college football so much today, is just like us talking about quad one, quad two, quad three. Like you said, there's 134 teams, and we concentrate so much weight on the top 25. Well, we got this amount of top 25 wins. They don't have any top 25 wins. It's not like that other teams aren't ranked outside the top 25. They still have rank. Oklahoma was ranked like 50th or 60th. Wisconsin was ranked in the 30s towards the middle of the season when we played them. Vanderbilt finished right outside the top 25. You had Georgia Tech 7-5. They were ranked in the 30s or 40s. Each team has an individualized ranking. It's just like so much is concentrated on the top 25 that the rest of the 103 teams that are left are just floating in the outer darkness, and there is no weight that is accounted for to if you beat one of those teams.
Well, and here's the last thing I'll say. The biggest mistake that I have seen made this season is doing away with divisions in these big conferences. The Big
Yes.
Ten and the SEC have gotten so large, with both of them having at least 16 teams in it. And with the SEC playing 8 games, you basically have 7 teams in the SEC that you are not going to play. And so when you don't have divisions and the teams in your divisions are not playing like schedules, you're always going to have a team like Texas who basically dodges every top team except for one. You're going to have a team like Indiana and Penn State that dodges every top team but one. And I'll tell you what the Big Ten has done moving forward. If you notice, when the SEC schedules came out a few weeks ago, they basically took the 2024 conference schedule and they just flip-flopped the home games. So now you'll have Texas going to Georgia, Ole Miss going to Georgia, Alabama going to Georgia, Tennessee coming to Alabama, Arkansas going to Tennessee. Everybody's just flip-flopped around. The Big Ten, after seeing what has went down with the committee, they took their best teams and said, you know what? Oregon's not going to Ohio State this year. We don't want those 2 guys playing in the regular season, because ultimately that could cost us a playoff spot. So now you've got other conferences who are manipulating their conference schedules for their top teams. And then you've got Greg Sankey and the SEC offices who are taking teams like Georgia and Alabama and Tennessee and Ole Miss, who should be the best in the SEC, and just throwing them through a meat grinder. And I'm here to tell you, it's going to happen again next year. We're going to have a bunch of 10-2 and 9-3 teams, and you'll be doing good to get 2 or 3 teams in the playoff next year. Meanwhile, the ACC and the Big Ten and everybody else is going to fool around and gobble up all these wild card spots because they're not playing anybody during the regular season. Something's got to be done with the schedule. That, to me, that is the biggest change that needs to be made. We've got to do something to level the playing field with
that is exactly right. Thank you, Nick Myers, for the reader question, for some quality content on this episode of SEC Mafia. Now we bring you our upcoming SEC bowl games. We're going to rush through these kind of quickly. Texas versus USC in the Las Vegas Bowl. I got Texas A&M. USC is trash. I think that Marcel Reed, I think he settles in, does very well on a neutral field against USC.
I take Texas A&M as well. Not to mention, whenever you start looking at the portal, and there's so much going on in the portal. There's so many people opting out of bowl games, entering the portal, committing. When the season's over, we're going to do a final show and just kind of break that down. But with only doing 1 show a week, we can't even keep up with this. So like I say, we'll kind of do a recap on that. But USC is just losing players left and right. I really thought for a moment that USC may actually come out and opt out of this bowl game. They've had so many players leave. I'm with you. I think Texas A&M, as long as Texas A&M shows up, I think they go in there and they put it on USC pretty good with all the opt-outs that they've had.
Absolutely. Vanderbilt and Georgia Tech will face off in the Birmingham Bowl right here in our backyard, people. 2059, about 40 minutes down the road from T-Town, about 45 from Jasper. It's a close one, and I hate to do this. I really, really hate to do this. I will pick against the SEC in this one. I think that Haynes King and what's the running back's name? Justice Hayes. I think that the duo of those combined with the amount of sacks that Vanderbilt has given up, this season. I do think that Georgia Tech's defensive line and offensive line, Brent Key is an O-line and D-line guru. He's got those trenches worked out very well. And Vanderbilt, they've had sparks of goodness in the trenches, but I think that Georgia Tech's O-line and D-line helps them to control the game. These two teams are very similar. They love to hold the ball. They love to run the ball, control the time of possession. And I think that with the arm of Haynes King that we saw against Georgia a couple of weeks ago, I think they're going to edge out Vanderbilt. I think it's going to be closer than everybody's thinking, but I do think that Georgia Tech does beat Vanderbilt.
I'm going to take the Commodores simply because Eric Singleton, the top wide receiver from Georgia Tech, has entered the portal. He is gone. He will not be playing in this football game. There's a couple other guys from Georgia Tech, a couple of guys from their defense has entered the portal and left. I think they're going to be a little bit depleted. Diego Pavia, and again, this is another rant for another time, going to be granted an extra year of eligibility because the whole JUCO route that he took. Don't like the ruling. Don't think that should be a thing. He is very exciting to watch. He has been one of my favorite players to watch this season. I am looking forward to being able to watch him again next season. I just don't agree with that ruling, but I do think that he will be riding some momentum off of that. Again, some of Georgia Tech's better players have hit the portal. I'm taking Vanderbilt here.
Yep. Amen. Love it. Armed Forces Bowl, Oklahoma versus Navy from the Athletic American Conference. Where's the location of this one at? Is it up in Maryland? I don't know. Anyway.
Could not tell you.
Not that deep. Still a great bowl matchup. Looking forward to seeing it. I have Oklahoma in this one. They still have their freshman quarterback, even though Jackson Arnold has hit the portal and is now going to Auburn. They have Michael Pittman, I believe is his name. Is that right? I don't think it is, but I think it starts with a P. MJ is what we'll call him because his last name, or he's a junior, so we'll just something junior. I think that it is going to be no contest. I think that Oklahoma will dominate this. The level of play between the two teams. Yes, Navy style is sort of old school. They like to run some triple op, read option stuff, but we saw what Brent Venables can do, man. Defensive wise, I don't know if any defensive players have hit the portal for them. But
I know they've lost a couple of wide receivers.
I know
this game is in Fort
Worth,
by the way. If this game was in the regular season and Oklahoma had played a Tennessee or an Alabama or somebody the week before, and they had to turn around within 1 week and play Navy, I think Navy could really give them some fits. This being a bowl game where Oklahoma's had a couple of weeks to prepare for that option offense. Like you say, I think Brent Venables is a good enough defensive coordinator that they'll be dialed in and ready. And I think Oklahoma wins this one, although I do think this one could be pretty close.
Okay. I like it. I love it. I love football. Texas Tech versus the Arkansas Razorbacks in the Liberty Bowl. You take the lead on this one.
I take Texas Tech. I think Arkansas, when you look at all the players that they've had hit the portal, they're up close to 30 guys who have hit the portal. Starting tight end, starting offensive linemen are now committed at Ole Miss. I just think Arkansas is going to be completely depleted. I hate to pick against the SEC, but Texas Tech is having one of their better years. Now, with that being said, I know Texas Tech has lost their best wide receiver and a couple more guys to the portal as well. But I just look at Arkansas being depleted. Texas Tech is an 8-win team this season, and this is one where I hope I am wrong, but I think this one could get ugly for the Hogs.
And that's kind of the reason that I was laughing, because Arkansas has lost like 30 people to the portal. I mean, they are just taking shots left and right. And not to mention Texas Tech's offense is actually having a good year. I mean, their red zone efficiency is like one of the highest in the nation, like 91%. So I think that it could get ugly for the Vols. I'm hoping maybe it'll be close, but I do think that Texas Tech will edge this one out. Sorry, Woo Pig Suey. Texas Tech for the win. With that, we'll bring you our final thoughts for today's episode. I got a final thought. With the performances that we saw in the first round, did the committee get it right? And I think we've already kind of tied into this. We know that they didn't get it right. We know that changes have to be made. Hopefully, after the season, after the national championship, the committee, all the commissioners for every conference, they kind of sit down, they go through all these webinars, they look at back through the season, they see what needs to be changed. Hopefully, Greg Sankey can make something happen with the format to where it can be changed, it can be updated, there can be it can just be better. Because yes, this was the first year of it, but it was so just nonchalant, kind of, yeah, here we're gonna throw out this product for everybody.
Well, and my thing is, let's not even beat the dead horse about Ole Miss, South Carolina, and Alabama. How I think they should be in. When you just look at the 12 teams that are in the playoffs, the seeding's not right. The 12 teams they put in, they did not even seed properly and correctly. It's just I don't know. It's just a bad product on the field. And I know with the conferences having the automatic bid, it's just insane to me, or having the automatic bid and the top 4 conference champions having to bye. It really, it's one of those things to where I'm going to quote Mr. Shirley from Christmas Vacation here, since it's Christmas time. There toward the end of the movie, when Cousin Eddie goes and brings them into Clark's living room, he says, some things sound good on paper until you actually see it put into place, and then you realize, oops, I screwed up.
Yep.
It sounds good that we have all these conference champions getting automatic bids. It sounds so good that the top 4 conference champions get buys, until we get to the last weekend of college football, and you've got Clemson and Arizona State and Boise State. You've got 3 conference champions ranked outside the top 10, and 2 of those have to get a first round bye. That completely screwed up the entire seeding of this thing. And now all of a sudden we've got basically 2 teams ranked outside the top 8 that should not even be hosting a playoff game, jumping up into the top 4, getting a first round bye. And so now we've got Penn State going to the Fiesta Bowl to play Boise State as I think a 10, 11 point favorite. And then you've got Texas going to Atlanta to the Peach Bowl, 13.5 point favorite over Arizona State. What are we doing?
Yeah.
What are we doing here?
When the final rankings came out, it was a telltale sign that this was so messed up, because you have Alabama ranked 11. Then you say, yes, they are one of the top 11 teams in the nation. Oh, but they're not going to get in the playoff because they don't deserve it. I mean, they don't, have enough wins. We can't put a 9-3 team in over a 10-2 team. It was ridiculous from the start. We beat it to a pulp tonight. But it's
my thing, that's the one thing that we've got to do a better job of is if we're going to stick with the conference champions automatically getting selected, that's one thing. But we can't handicap ourselves by how we seed this thing, because what we've done this first year is I think we're going to cause ourselves to have 2 duds for the first and the second round. Now, I do think Ohio State and Oregon will be a pretty good matchup, but that should have been seeded toward those 2 teams.
Matched up in the Final Four.
I think Notre Dame and Georgia has a potential to be a pretty good matchup, but we just got to avoid the Arizona State and Texas and the Boise State and Penn State in round 2. We have got to take the cuffs off to where we can at least seed these 12 teams better, to where we don't get these blowouts all throughout the playoffs.
Absolutely. Once again on your screen, my lovely, lovely people, we have our SEC Mafia contact information. Take one long good look at it, baby, and then go hit us a follow on Twitter, like and subscribe on YouTube, and follow us, and join the Mafia group on Facebook. Put a lot of time into that, and we love it. We love being able to interact with you guys. We just want to say thank you one more time. Merry Christmas. We hope everybody has a wonderful time with your families over the holidays. Merry Christmas. We will be back next week before Happy New Year. So I will wish you a Happy New Year. Got a special guest. Mr. Milo is aggravating me. He wants to say Merry Christmas to everybody. Get out of here. Go. So
we will see you guys next weekend, and we will break down the rest of the bowl games. We will break down the Georgia, Notre Dame, Texas, Arizona State second round matchup, and probably have a little bit longer episode as there's more action that next week. But again, like Tyler said, Merry Christmas, everyone. Eat a lot, have a good time with your family, and we'll see you next week.
Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night.